When one of the most famous men on the planet checked out of a hospital without saying a word to the man who had cleaned his room every single morning for 3 weeks, nobody thought anything of it. That was the point. It was Friday. February 13th, 2004. Miami, Florida. Jackson Memorial Hospital on Northwest 12th Avenue. The kind of building that never fully sleeps. Elevators running at 3 a.m., nurses at the station at every hour. The smell of antiseptic and something underneath it that no amount of cleaning ever quite covers. Shaquille O'Neal had been in room 318 since January 22nd. He had undergone surgery on his left knee, a procedure to address cartilage damage that had been building for 2 seasons. He was 31 years old. He weighed 325 pounds. He was the most dominant player in the NBA, and his left knee had finally asked for a pause. He was not a difficult patient. The nurses said so. He took up the entire bed and then some. His feet hung off the end. His voice filled the room when he laughed, which was often. He watched television loudly. He ordered the same breakfast every morning: eggs, toast, orange juice, and a second orange juice. He called his mother every evening at 7 p.m. exactly. Room 318 was cleaned every morning at 6:15 a.m. The man who cleaned it was named Erwin Castillo, 54 years old. Originally from Managua, Nicaragua, he had been working in environmental services at Jackson Memorial for 11 years. He wore a gray uniform with his name embroidered in blue thread on the left chest pocket. He carried a rolling cart with 4 compartments. He had a system for every room. He never varied it. He came in at 6:15. He nodded once if the patient was awake. He cleaned the bathroom first, then the floor, then the surfaces, then the window ledge. He replaced the towels, the soap, the tissues. He checked the trash. He straightened the chairs. He left. The whole thing took 11 minutes. He did not make conversation. Not because he was unfriendly. Because he had learned in 11 years that most patients did not want conversation at 6:15 in the morning. They wanted their room clean and they wanted to go back to sleep. He cleaned room 318 every morning for 22 days. He never once mentioned that he recognized the man in the bed. He never asked for an autograph. He never said he watched the games. He came in. He nodded. He cleaned. He left. On the morning of February 13th, a Friday, he came in at 6:15 as usual. The bed was already empty. The room had already been vacated. Shaquille O'Neal had been discharged the evening before, Thursday night. February 12th. He was already on a plane back to Los Angeles. Erwin cleaned the empty room the same way he cleaned it every morning. He straightened the chairs that nobody had sat in. He replaced the soap nobody would use. He wiped the window ledge. 11 minutes. He rolled his cart out and moved to room 319. He did not think about it again. But to understand what happened 6 days later, you have to go back, not to the hospital. Further back, you have to go back past 4 NBA championships, past the rookie contract worth $40 million, and the endorsement deals and the business empire and the doctorate in education from Barry University. You have to go back to a military base in San Antonio, Texas, in the fall of 1985. To a boy who was already 6 feet tall at 13 and who still could not figure out how to take up the right amount of space in any room he entered. Shaquille O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, raised him with the particular kind of love that does not announce itself. It just shows up, every morning, before anyone else is awake, and does the work that needs doing without being asked. She worked nights when she had to. She worked doubles when the money ran short. She stretched rice into dinner and called it enough and made sure her children believed her. She was the first person Shaq called when anything happened. Good or bad. Always. His stepfather, Philip Harrison, was a sergeant in the United States Army. Philip was a man who believed in something Shaq heard so many times it became part of how he thought. Philip said, "The people you walk past every day without seeing. The ones who make the place run before you get there and after you leave. Those are the people who hold the world up. You see them. You remember them. That is not charity. That is just paying attention." Shaq was 13 years old the first time he heard that. He was 31 years old, lying in a hospital bed in Miami when he understood it fully, because he had been watching Erwin Castillo every morning for 3 weeks. He had not said anything. He had watched. The way Irwin came in at 6:15 without fail. The way he nodded once and got to work. The way he cleaned the bathroom first, always the bathroom first, then the floor in the same direction every time. The way he straightened the chairs, even when they were already straight. The way he replaced the soap, even when the bar was barely used. Shaq noticed these things because his mother had taught him to notice them. Because Philip had told him to see the people others walked past. He also noticed something else. On the 6th morning, a Tuesday, Irwin came in at 6:15. He nodded once. He began with the bathroom. Then he stopped. He stood in the doorway of the bathroom for 3 full seconds. He pressed one hand briefly against the door frame. Then he went back to work. Shaq said nothing. He watched. On the 9th morning, a Friday, Irwin's cart made a different sound coming down the hall. A rattling sound. One of the wheels was going. Irwin came in, nodded once, cleaned, left. Outside in the hall, Shaq heard the cart rattling all the way to the elevator. On the 14th morning, Irwin came in and there was a cut on his left hand, between the thumb and forefinger freshly bandaged. He cleaned the whole room without changing anything about how he worked. He used that hand the same as he always did. Shaq watched all of this and said nothing. He had learned something over the years. From his mother, from Philip, from 2 decades of being in rooms where people wanted things from him constantly. He had learned that the most important thing you can give a person who is doing their job with dignity is the dignity of letting them do it. You do not make a scene. You do not perform your gratitude. You pay attention first, then you act, and you act quietly. On his last evening in room 318, Thursday, February 12th, Shaq made a phone call, not to his assistant, not to his agent, not to anyone on his team. He called a man named Dr. Reginald Okafor, who was the director of patient services at Jackson Memorial Hospital and who owed Shaq a favor from a charity event 2 years earlier. The conversation lasted 7 minutes. Shaq was discharged. The following morning, before Irwin's shift began, he left without saying a word. 6 days later, on Thursday, February 19th, 2004, Irwin Castillo arrived at Jackson Memorial Hospital at 5:50 a.m. for his shift. He clocked in. He collected his cart. He checked his assignments for the morning. Room 301, Room 304, Room 309, Room 312. At 7:22 a.m., a woman from the hospital's Human Resources Department named Sandra Mejia appeared in the 3rd-floor corridor and asked him to come with her when he had a moment. He finished room 312 first, 11 minutes. Then he followed her. The HR office was on the 2nd floor. Sandra Mejia closed the door. She sat down. She looked at him across the desk. She told him that the hospital had received a call the previous week. The call was from a patient who had recently been discharged. The patient had requested to remain anonymous. The patient had made a donation to the hospital's Employee Wellness Fund. A designated portion of that donation was specified by the donor for a single recipient. Irwin sat very still. Sandra slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a letter. 1 page, no letterhead. Typed, not handwritten, it said, "I was in room 318 for 22 days. Every morning at 6:15, a man came to clean my room. He came every single day without fail. He worked with the same care and the same precision on day 1 as he did on day 22. He never varied his system. He never asked for anything. He treated the room the same whether I was watching or not. I noticed a cart with a broken wheel. I noticed a bandaged hand that did not slow him down. I noticed a man who stopped for 3 seconds in a doorway one morning and then went back to work. I do not know what that moment was about. I did not need to know. Some things are private. What I know is that he went back to work. My stepfather was a man who said, the people who hold the world up are the ones you walk past every day without seeing. I have tried my whole life not to do that. This is not charity. This is just paying attention. The letter was not signed. At the bottom, below the letter, was a number. Irwin looked at the number for a long time. He looked at Sandra Mejia. She said, "It's real." He looked at the number again. $50,000. Designated for Irwin Castillo, Environmental Services, 3rd floor, Jackson Memorial Hospital, Miami, Florida. He sat completely still for 11 seconds. The same amount of time it took him to clean a hospital room. Then he pressed both hands over his face, and he did not move. Sandra Mejia did not say anything. She had been in HR for 16 years. She knew when to let a moment be what it was. After a long time, Irwin lowered his hands. His eyes were red. He looked at the letter again. He looked at the number. He said quietly, "Who was in room 318? Sandra said, "The donor asked to remain anonymous." Irwin nodded slowly. He folded the letter carefully along its original creases. He placed it in the front pocket of his gray uniform next to his embroidered name. He stood up. He said, "I have rooms to finish." He went back to work. There is a thing that happens when a person who has spent years being invisible is suddenly seen. Not publicly, not with cameras and applause, quietly, the way Lucille O'Neill used to see people, the way Philip Harrison used to see people, fully, like what they were doing mattered, like the 11 minutes they spent in a hospital room at 6:15 in the morning mattered as much as anything else happening. Anywhere in the world that morning, Irwin Castillo did not tell anyone at the hospital what had happened. Not that day, not that week. He came in at 5:50 every morning. He clocked in. He collected his cart. He replaced the broken wheel that same afternoon, paid for it himself, said nothing to anyone about why. He worked his rooms. He left at 2:30 p.m. He called his daughter that evening. Her name was Isabella. She was 19 years old and studying nursing at Miami-Dade College. He had been helping pay her tuition by working double shifts on Saturdays. The double shifts had been running for 2 years. He told her she did not need to worry about the tuition anymore. She asked why. He said, someone paid attention. She did not understand. He did not explain further. He said goodnight. He hung up. He took the letter out of his uniform pocket. He read it one more time. He folded it back along its creases. He placed it in the drawer of his nightstand, under his Bible and a photograph of his mother in Managua, taken in 1987. It is still there. The story became known in 2019. 15 years later, when Isabella Castillo, by then a registered nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital, mentioned it in an interview with a small Miami health journal. She had started working at the same hospital as her father. She mentioned briefly a story her father had told her about a patient and a letter and $50,000 and the way it changed everything without making any noise. A journalist picked it up. Then another. Then a podcast. Then a Twitter thread that reached 6.8 million people in 4 days. Irwin Castillo, 69 years old by then, still working at Jackson Memorial Hospital, gave one interview. One. He sat down with a local Miami reporter on a Tuesday afternoon in his uniform between shifts. He held the letter in his hands. The paper was soft from being folded and unfolded over 15 years. The crease lines had gone white. The reporter asked him what he thought when he first read it. He said, "I thought about a cart with a broken wheel. I thought about how I had been meaning to replace it for 2 weeks and I kept putting it off. And then I thought, if someone noticed that wheel, they noticed everything. And if they noticed everything, then everything I did in those 22 days mattered." He paused. He said, "I always believed it mattered. But it is different when someone else sees it." The reporter asked if he knew who the donor was. Irwin smiled. It was the smile of a man who has known the answer to a question for 15 years and has decided that the answer belongs to him. He said, "I have my ideas." He folded the letter back along its creases. He placed it in his front pocket. He stood up. He said, "I have rooms to finish," and he went back to work. Before you go, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Whether you are in Miami or Manila, in Lagos or London, we read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share it with one person today, because that is exactly how this kind of attention travels. One person, one room, one morning at a time. We will see you in the next one.